Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning. Our very, very longly titled interest group meeting, the first official meeting, I might add. I've got a few more people joining, as I can announce that we did finally get this, amazing, thank you, this group ratified by Council last week. But before I go any further, just to start with the acknowledgement of country, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners, the Turrbal and the Yagara peoples of the lands that we're meeting on today in Brisbane, Meanjin, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcoming, are there any new RDA members in the room today or online? No, all fairly established RDA membership. And before I start, in theory, we're supposed to be running everything through the app. Do people in the room have the app? Have you got it on your device? That's going to have a show of hands. Some people, but not all. Okay, so we will be flexible, but for those joining online, if you have questions, you can put them in the app. My colleague Peter, thank you very much for moderating the session today, Peter. We'll be monitoring that and reflecting questions back into the room. I really did want this to be an interactive session, so I don't want to talk the whole session. I want to hear from you all. I'm really kind of recapping what's happened so far and how we take this work forward. And so today's session, a recap on the work, our statement of work, overlap with other RDA groups. This group has been very European focused thus far, and I do include the UK in Europe. I'm based in London in the UK, working for the University of Westminster. My name's Jenny. Actually, I'm not sure if I said that bit at the beginning, sorry. And then looking at an implementation plan, ongoing activities, next steps. There are a number of links there. So there's a link to the slide deck you can look at. There's a session link, there's a collaborative notes link. Could I ask you to add your names and contact details into that just so that we can keep a record of who joined? And because I'm being funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, I need to kind of keep a check on who's engaging with us and how many people. And a link to the statement of work, which I'm not going to go through in great detail today. It's very long, but we're certainly open to getting feedback from you all. In theory, your questions are supposed to go through the app. We will work with that as best we can, but if you don't have the app up and have some comments to make, please do just put your hand up. So it's been a journey, I have to say. I was saying to Peter earlier that the first time I proposed this idea of thinking about this space was at RDA in 2019 in Helsinki, and at that point there was just not really the interest or the people in the room that felt it was a priority. So it's been going on for a while, but in terms of this iteration, my colleagues, Adam Vials and I reconvened conversations at RDA early in 2024 at P22, and then I think it was VP23. So really just understanding how we were going to talk about this idea of non-traditional research outputs and actually what about NTROs we were thinking about, because we're very aware of all the work that's been going on in Australia, but really focusing on that infrastructure space and making it better. So my day job is a scholarly communications lead in our Library and Archive service at Westminster, and I'm also now the PI for a project to set up a national data service in the UK for practice research. So primarily in the first instance, creative practice research in visual and performing arts. So that's kind of where I've come from in this space. The statement of work's been ongoing for a while. At P23, Andrew Hoffman from Leiden University joined us, and then we connected up with Robin Burgess at ARDC so we could get some more kind of geographic representation. We're very mindful that that's still not quite right, and we're trying to find other interested people across the world to join this, particularly also in discipline communities. Our creative and visual performing artists don't tend to engage with spaces like RDA, so we want to change that. So it's very much been this kind of momentum building. So we've built this community, so we're up to 45 members. If you're not a member on the RDA website, we really do encourage you to join, because that's a really good space to communicate with people. And really over the last few months, things really started moving. We submitted our proposal. We got some feedback from Technical Design Authority, which we then went back to community. And I think that thinking about scope we'll talk about in a minute. It's really important here. We reconsulted with the community, went back to Technical Design Authority, and then it went to, that was approved about 4 weeks ago. And then on Friday last week, we got notified that RDA Council had approved the interest group. So this is the first official meeting of the interest group, which is fantastic. And huge thank you to all those involved in getting us to this point. So I'm going to go back to the statement of work for a moment, just because if you haven't seen the conversations that have gone on online, I think it's helpful for you to understand what we've spoken about as a community. Yes, we're still very much, this is a work in progress, and we really want to hear from people, find out your thoughts. So the definition of this group has taken a lot of back and forth, to and fro, to get us to where we are. So we've refined the scope to focus on creative practice, multimodal research, and interdisciplinary outputs where current infrastructure is inadequate. So really thinking about how this fits into the surrounding infrastructure. That explicit inclusion of interdisciplinary research as a core focus area, addressing some systematic barriers faced by cross-boundary research. And for me personally, this really goes back to our visual and performing arts colleagues who really struggle to engage with some of the infrastructure out there because it doesn't look like their research. They've always got to fit it, retrofit it. So a detailed 12-month, very ambitious work plan, which I came back from leave and said to my collaborators, okay, so we're going to do all of this between October and December, so we're definitely looking for volunteers to come and join us and work on this. Specific deliverables and realistic capacity management, enhanced collaboration framework, so certainly more actively, proactively engaging with other RDA groups and external partners, potential partners, integration of FAIR within our approach rather than a separate concern, and community engagement strategy. So again, our community engagement at the moment is very Europe and UK focused, and so we really want to expand that, and so we want to hear what we've missed out, really. I'm sure there's quite a lot already. So the scope, without wanting to overdo reading this out, but I think those which do not take the form of published books, book chapters, journal articles, or conference publications. Examples include film, all of those things are often the primary means of communication in creative, visual, and performing arts. They are created across a wide range of other disciplines as well. Which bring their own languages. And I think that's what's interesting but challenging about these things, is that we really do cover a range of disciplines. So this group will address outputs created through creative practice and multimodal research methodology, specifically focusing on describing what is created, how it is created, and who is creating it, where current information standards and structures provide inadequate representation. Now, all of the people who've input into this wanted a very, very broad, a much broader definition. In that kind of feedback process, working with Technical Design Authority and RDA, we, as a community, agreed. We went back to community to get some feedback. We focused this definition. We are very conscious it overlaps with other groups, and so we're not trying to replicate what's going on in those groups. And unfortunately, the project identifies birds of a feather is happening now, so we won't be in that session today, but really any other suggestions, ideas people have about other RDA groups that might be doing relevant or related work. I might just add, if it's a very technical question, it will be something I'll have to refer back to my colleague Adam Vials more in the UK. He is definitely the technical, as opposed to the slightly technical member of the co-chairs. And I think really broadening out that geographic representation as well. I think there's a lot of me talking and people just watching and listening at the moment, but perhaps questions will come through. So we've got an implementation plan. So phase 1 is focused between now and Christmas, or end of December this year, and really trying to start monthly cadence of meetings. So the meetings have been quite ad hoc between the co-chairs thus far. So we've agreed on, and again, we'll never get this timing right when we're trying to work with global communities, but we will start with this third Wednesday of the month at 2 p.m. UTC, which I think is about 9, maybe between 9 and 11 p.m. Australian time. Quarterly in-person meetings at RDA events where possible, and some deliverables around use cases. We've got some use cases already within the group, but we're looking for other use cases, and particularly those interdisciplinary use cases that cross across different discipline borders. Preliminary infrastructure gap analysis report, I think Adam will be leading on that one, and community skills and needs assessment. I think, and that's one thing that really strikes me about the work that goes on in Australia is how collaborative it is, and those kind of frameworks that you develop are really helpful for everyone, and how we can kind of work together to progress that in other places. So liaison meetings with the other interest groups. So that's still quite a lot to do between now and the end of December. So phases 2 and 3, looking at adaptive, I should say. Sorry, I landed yesterday morning at about 6:30, so the jet lag is still looming. Looking at, so after that kind of first year, looking at year 2, meeting frequency, seeing what's going on, looking at potential working groups, RDA working groups that come out of discussions and that work, and that might be crossovers with other areas, particularly the work we're doing around creative practice and portfolios of multi-component outputs, as they're known in the UK, and how that links, for example, to project identifiers and the RAID. Certainly doing work around the credit taxonomy and broadening that out, because at the moment it's still very science-focused. And yeah, just finding some spaces that are sort of relevant to become potential working groups. And really agreeing that as a community, so getting input from all of those with an interest. And then, looking at expanding that gap analysis reports. We have, and I haven't said anything about this yet, we have documented what we call the Practice Research Voices schema. So that's a metadata schema for practice research outputs, which came out of our original scoping project funded by ARDC. So we have a metadata schema that is documented. I haven't got links to that in this, but I can share links to all of our other work in the Google Notes after the meeting. And looking at where certainly our priorities for our work in the UK at the moment are very much around DataCite, ORCID, credit, and RAID as well. And then seeing how we go, because I think that's the other thing too, is this really is reliant on the community coming together and contributing. So what's possible? So perhaps actually forming working groups and partner repositories to pilot implementation. So certainly the National Data Service will be one space, but we're very interested in how that works with institutional repositories in the UK. We, as ENACT, will be working with, will be one of AHRC's Infrastructure for Digital Arts and Humanities repositories. So we'll be working with the Archaeology Data Service, the Oxford Text Archive, the Museums Data Service, DISCO, which is Scientific Objects and Collections, and a new Heritage Data Service. So that's certainly our focus in the UK right now. And then finally, strategic planning for the future, and looking at how it's going, and there'll be regular touch points to review where that's going on. This is really, in some ways, the starting point, and looking at sustainable development beyond this initial phase. So I think, again, some of this will be reliant on how many participants we have contributing to this, but looking at spotlight case studies, reviews, surveys, and documentation. Have we got any questions online yet, Peter? No? Silence? Okay. Have we got anyone online, do we know? It's a bit hard to tell, I guess.
I don't actually know.
Oh, okay. So those people online, if you are online and you've got the app, do at least add your name or add it in the Google Doc. Yeah, it's a bit disconcerting when you're not quite sure who's not in the room. I do know most of my UK-based colleagues will be asleep right now, so are probably not joining today. So groups that we've identified already, so NISO particularly in relation to credit, and I guess RAID to a certain extent, but RAID's much more direct engagement, particularly at this meeting. DataCite, we've got on our ENACT project, we've got the British Library and JISC as project partners, so that brings in JESCOPE and DataCite in the UK, as well as ORCID from JISC, and EOS, Lyrasis in the US. I know they're doing a RAID pilot program over there. UK Reproducibility Network, so a lot of this work links to reuse and open research, open science. And then, yeah, this idea of case studies outside Europe and the UK. So ENACT is certainly the work I'm leading. God, it's a while ago now, the culture and capture projects in the UK, Australia's work in this space as well. But, you know, what are we missing? Who are we missing, I think, is the question. It's the people within RDA are amazing, but actually there's a lot of people outside RDA who will have an interest in this work, and how do we reach them, or who in RDA is already doing work that we can harness. And then next steps in that we have some calls planned. I don't think we've got invitations out yet. I need to go back to the team to organise that. And really just, that was kind of it from me on the presentation a bit, but really what I wanted to do was get some feedback from this group and to welcome you all, really, and thank you for joining. But yeah, I think over to the room somewhat. Are there any particular questions or comments? Yep.
We'll use the mic.
Yes, sorry. I work with performing arts organizations, so I just like to be loud. So I'm Christina Drummond, and in my free time, I'm on the board of some performing arts organizations, and so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. One of the things that struck me as I looked at your list of organizations you are working with is that we don't have the creators there. And so I'm curious if you are working with any of the associations. I'm based in the US. We have, you know, the American Association for Museums, for example, all of the professional associations for the creators. Are you working with them? Is that on the roadmap? And have you taken this concept to them?
Yes, and that's a very good question. This is what happens when I do things at the last minute. So in the UK, so my ENACT project team is a mix of librarians and academics. And so over the last few years, we've gone to the Royal Musical Association twice now, and there's been a lot of interest from that community. A couple of months ago, we were at the Media, Communication and Cultural Studies Association conference in Edinburgh, and actually we had a couple of Australians at that as well, and they were very interested. So we went to Daria EU 2 years ago now, and they were interested, but they were probably less directly interested in the same way that RMA and MEXA were. So we are, I think what's really interesting but challenging is that there's a lot of different communities, and so part of this work is actually making connections out. So we can expand that because there are so many of them, and how we talk directly to them.
If I could just follow up on that. One others that I would recommend in Europe specifically is the Thames data space. So there is a trust environment for media that is coming up to look at how to take media and share that in a trusted environment, given that you're looking at media outputs as well.
Hi, I'm Cordula from NFDI, so the German National Research Data Infrastructure, exactly based from NFDI, and it remembered me of the goals of NFDI for culture, also NFDI for objects, so it might be interesting to talk to them.
Yes, no, that's very true, and they have been mentioned before. I think Andrew, particularly at Leiden, has mentioned them, but that's a reminder to go back to them.
So we have an information booth, so if you want to come to us, booth 16.
Yeah, oh, amazing, thank you.
Hi, my name's Emma. I'm from the ARDC, but I also co-chair the RDA Evaluation of Research Interest Group. So it would be great to establish a liaison with you, particularly because we've been recently exploring the disciplinary aspects of research evaluation, and obviously NTROs come up a lot in that. And so we've got a session on Thursday. I'm not sure if you're still here then, but it would be great to chat a bit further.
Yes, I will definitely try and join. I need to work out what else is going on, actually. And I think on that note, I was at last week an event in the UK called the Hidden REF. So REF is the UK's research evaluation exercise that happens every 7 years. I think what was interesting about that is it goes back to that comment around, and I think that's a big challenge in that evaluation space, is that discipline focus is certainly, it was very obvious that it was not arts and creative practice people who'd contributed to that, to what was going on in that space. So I've now sent my music and my visual arts colleagues to go and join that conversation, because they were making decisions about how to evaluate non-traditional research outputs without that discipline engagement. So I think it is, yeah.
And I should say I have a background in the creative arts.
Okay.
I'm the advocate.
Oh, amazing.
On that interest group.
Cool, thank you. No, that's really, really helpful, because I think that's it. It's the danger is because they're often treated by their type of outputs, that nuance, that narrative is missing, and that's really important.
Can I add one in while we're talking, while I've got the microphone? So, yeah, I'm Peter, but I'm co-chair of one of the interest groups around data management plans. And I think in those groups, we look at, we've created a standard for how data management plans can be used across technologies. One of the discussions, though, I think we need more from creative practice and NTROs in there. One of the things that comes up is, well, we need a separate standard for software management plans, and so there's a bit of an active discussion around that, and we could, spend a whole day talking about that. But whether, software is just data in a different form, or it has particular things that need to be there. But I think, do we need an NTRO data management plan? I don't know, but that might be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and certainly something the university I work for, practice PhDs is certainly something we've been pioneering for 20 years, and so actually, but still our national repository for theses, Ethos, still has a very text-based metadata profile, for example, and those theses are still often having to be submitted in very text-based formats, and sharing them is very difficult, because actually once you start removing all of the IP'd and copyrighted content, you don't have a narrative left. And so I think, there's work to be done in that space, and that links to, and I know for us in the UK, there's been a consultation on the national data policy, and then they've said, well, we'll have this policy and then we'll deal with the arts and humanities specialist guidance afterwards. And so I would say the enduring feedback from the community has been, you need to get the main policy right, otherwise you're excluding a lot of actually how we deal with arts and humanities data. And of course, when I talk to my arts and humanities colleagues, we don't really talk about data. We just talk about their research kind of process and outputs.
Hi, my name is Carlos Martinez. I'm from the Netherlands Design Center. It's a little bit of a reaction to the software part. So, because I saw that you already mentioned the software source code interest group.
Yes, yeah.
So at the Design Center, what we do is mostly we write research software, and that's our main output. So it's a very non-traditional research output, I guess not connected to the humanities, but it's something that is not data, and treating data as software as data, that just like a different type of data, it doesn't really work for software. And this is something that for us has been an issue for the last 10 years. So we created our own research software directory, which is a platform where you can basically showcase your software and the things that you do, but the actual software is still in its own repository, and it's just like a window shop where you can see what it does and where it's been used, and then the context of the software. So we started creating it for the Design Center, but because it's an open source project, it's quite open. There's actually quite a bit of adoption from from our German colleagues. I believe Helmholtz Association are using it, and I believe there's a couple of universities in the UK that are also looking into it. So that's what we've done. It's maybe doesn't fit, but maybe there's some lessons learned there. So
absolutely, and I think that's, originally we wanted to include all of these non-traditional research outputs in this particular interest group, but the scope ended up being narrow. But I think we need to signpost, and I think even in the data service we're building, we won't have everything in the one place. It will be the signposting, and those links are really important. When people are mentioning ideas and initiatives too, can you make sure you put them in the Google Doc just so that we've got a record? Thanks.
So just to build on this conversation, I don't know how many in the room have heard of countermetrics before. So we do a lot of work on impact and usage. And one of the things I'll note that's been really useful going from, so I work in humanities social sciences with book as the artifact, being able to take books and journals, and now they've brought in data but thinking about these other alternative outputs, if there was a way to bring that into that ecosystem, so an item could be a video, that could be really neat to have that fit alongside the other standards.
Yeah, I think what's tricky, and so the way we're working with practice research is it's not so much necessarily the video alone, it's actually the portfolio of the different elements, which could be video, it could be text, it could be exhibition, it could be these other things, and actually getting that represented in that nuanced way, because that's certainly what our discipline people are asking for, because I think that's what's tricky, is as soon as we start sticking in video, what's interesting about this space from the research we've done is that sometimes the research will be obvious in the outputs, but often it needs that narrative, and so having just the items alone is problematic. I think the other tricky thing is around what kind of statistics we end up with, usage metrics we end up with, because the communities themselves don't necessarily want downloads on a video. They want the representation of the whole and how that's used. And so there's some interesting work going on in Canada around impact, and I think that seeing what happens with that space as well will be interesting, because what matters to the communities who generate this information. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm Kit Greenhill. I do skills for the House and Indigenous Research Data Commons at ARDC. I've got sort of two related. Very quickly, you mentioned the practice research data schema, and then I didn't. Yeah. So I'm really interested in whether that's been applied to case studies, what type of case studies it was applied to, what type of things were learnt, but also whether there's been any move to, regardless of how a particular non-traditional output is going to be used, that's going to determine a lot about what type of metadata is recorded about it. However, is there a move to have a minimum viable record that actually records, okay, don't care how you're going to use it, make sure you've got these 5 standard things that then we could use for counter or whatever? Is there a move to sort of have some kind of standardised pseudo record that nobody's going to use except everybody's got one that's uniform?
Yes, okay, so where do I start with that? Okay, so I think firstly, the metadata's come from working with the discipline communities that we are working with already. So from that kind of, I would say at the moment, very much music, composition, performance, that kind of space, as well as visual and creative, or sort of visual arts. What I would say, and actually I can put in a link after the session to, we did a session at Open Repositories this year that talks a bit more about the detail, and there is a GitHub link I can share for people to import, because we certainly do want input and criticism as well as kind of support for the work we've done. So what we've got in there at the moment, it's very, because this community wants their data to look good, so part of getting the funding for building a national data service is to get to make it look nice, because let's be honest, most repositories don't look nice to a creative and visual arts person. So we've got context statement in there to reflect narrative, and that sits both at portfolio level and individual item level. We've got that idea of portfolio, which again is problematic because different communities see portfolio as a different thing, but we've used portfolio to go beyond collection. So you could have a collection within a portfolio, for example. Rights, provenance, so working on a provenance framework to capture that so that it moves with the work. Contributorship beyond author, so at the moment, which is, as I say, straightforward as creator, collaborator, and participant, but actually acknowledging the role of participant. And so that they're probably the key kind of high-level items that are in there. We actually use artifact, so colleagues at CoSector in the UK have done the technical documentation work. So we've got collection artifact, which could be any kind of item, non-text item, text as well, so acknowledging that these disciplines create text, so it's kind of connecting those up. And then event. An event, could be exhibition. It's something that dates are important, but also, for example, design charrette is something that came up with architecture, for example. So they're the high-level approaches. I think that possibly kind of answers your question, Catherine, a bit more about what kind of details in there. And that has come from the research work we've done. But again, this is the time to get some feedback on what's missing, what works. We haven't got any further, really, than documenting.
What's the reception by practitioners to that? Just blankness, or
I think we've not had enough capacity to do in-depth kind of consultation on the metadata schema, partly because when you're speaking at a conference, it's really been basically just giving people like oversight. So part of the funding we've got in the UK for ENACT will be we will have Pathfinder projects, which will be working with not only discipline people, but also research data people in their institutions, and we'll have more community events. So I think what's tricky is finding people in the creative and performing arts who are interested enough or willing enough to engage on that metadata level, because it is just it's a higher level of, or a different level of engagement that generally they just haven't done before. So part of it, I think that skills piece is really interesting too around, so part of the work is capacity building and actually building the right level of knowledge, because most of them don't want to know all of that detail. So yeah, how you, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from, you know, what's going on in Australia with skills frameworks in order to how we pitch that so that it gets to the right people, but it doesn't overwhelm them either. I think that's the other thing to remember, is that creative and performing arts practice researchers in the UK particularly often have their own professional practice as well, so they're not in the academy full time, so they're only working 1 or 2 days a week, and so they don't have the capacity in the same way as perhaps a scientist who's employed full time, for whom that's their whole kind of job. So I think there's some of these other things to remember. Did that answer both questions, Catherine? I'm not sure if it, okay, awesome. Yeah, yes, yeah, I will grab that out after the session. I did think this morning I probably could have put that in beforehand, but yeah, I'll put some links in the Google Doc for people. Yes.
I apologize if I missed this at the beginning. What are the top 3 use cases that you see coming out from the practitioners and how they want to use this information at the endpoint?
I think in the UK, I would say it's this practice research, particularly in the creative and performing arts. It's coming from partially from the fact that the Research Excellence Framework, or REF, recognises practice research. But it recognises it in a way that it's that context and narrative, because at the moment, if you engage with those communities, you're like, well, we can talk about non-traditional research outputs, but then again, it starts with the format rather than what's the whole of their research. Part of this is about saving them time. I think what's tricky at the moment is this has all been like, this is what we want to do, but we haven't done any of it yet. So I think having a national repository where we can show people what we're doing will make it much easier for them to engage, because there's been a lot of conversation that's just really, this is what we want to do. They like the approaches, but so far. But I think there's been, the main question that's come up is around rights.
So the practitioners want to reflect the rights that their works are made available under, or I guess from the practitioners, if I'm a singer, a performer, but I also have the research post, what is it I'm trying to do differently that this solves?
I think what's interesting, and this is where I would generally get my discipline collaborators to speak, but it's about, you know, there's practice and then there's practice research. And so just because you're a practitioner doesn't mean that you're carrying out research. Sometimes it is simply practice. That's okay. Now, I think what's interesting is that often you're documenting the practice to kind of evidence the research. So I think that's helpful, because again, it's not forcing all practitioners to be researchers either, but actually having, I think what they have said, and again, I mean, the research project we did is a couple of years old now, but just them finding a place where you can look for this research. At the moment, it's very hard to find it. And also this research often happens not just in creative practice communities, but in other disciplines, but they're all very kind of in a corner of a university. They're not necessarily like visible in the same way. So finding it. But having said that, there's also dangers with, I know we had an education researcher we did an interview with, and they were very much like, you know, I like you sharing this for the greater good. I'm not happy if my university starts judging me on it and evaluating me on it. So I think there's a real tension there. So I think, yeah, it's a bit, because it's been so, this is kind of our approach, what do you think? We've got bits of anecdotal feedback, but probably not enough at scale yet.
Just sort of flipping it around too, we have a project where we've got looking at the fact that arts data and practitioner data is scattered in Australia across a number of databases. So we've got a stage one, and we've got the creative arts funding and from a researcher perspective of trying to trace artistic careers, the impact of one artist who collaborates with whom, having some kind of standardised way of expressing not necessarily research outputs of creative works, but just creative works generally will help research about those actually work. And I'm just wondering whether, as a parallel unintended consequence, actually having some kind of schema that could be used for interoperability of those kind of events might be a useful outcome as well.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. Going to say any more comments?
I might just, while people are thinking of things, just mention one of the documents that Jenny's also included in the statement of work is the Australian framework for NTROs, which was developed for librarians. Like the focus was for libraries and librarians, and I helped out with that work. And it is a framework. It was developed through CALL, who are the Council for Australian University Libraries, and that work developed kind of a framework for librarians to assist researchers with non-traditional research outputs. I'll put a link in the collaborative document about this. But basically we did, it's fairly extensive and it has some good use cases in it, I think, and we interviewed quite a few researchers. We interviewed librarians, we interviewed repository owners, we did an environmental scan and a survey and a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, I'll just point people to that. I figured that people in this room might find that of interest, and I suppose you'll find the link too in the statement of work for that.
Okay, I feel like, and I'm guessing we've not. I'd love to know if anyone did join online, but I think I suspect that those in other time zones probably found it a bit challenging. But I think really it's just thank you all for joining this morning. I say this morning, it is afternoon, isn't it? And your interest, and please do sign up to the group because we really want to expand that. And if you think of something after the session, or if you're aware of anyone in your own communities, or you can signpost this work to people who might be interested. I think a real aspiration for RDA next year is to get more creative practice discipline people to RDA. So that's my goal for the next year, because I really want to get the discipline communities into these conversations, because I think as librarians and information data people, we're good at talking about it, but getting the people who are affected in the room is a bit more difficult. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm not going to keep you if we're done, but thank you.